Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. So we're going to do my March wrap up, and it's going to be a little bit of a weird video for multiple reasons. So I'm changing up the way that I will be talking about books to you guys. In addition to that, this might be broken up into parts, so you might see a different background later in the video, just because my attention span is not there and I can't get myself to sit down long enough to do this video. We're gonna do what we can, and then we are going to come back and wrap up the rest of my reads. I did do a mid-month wrap-up. If you want to go check out that video, I won't be talking too in-depth about those books. I will mostly just give you my star rating, and then we'll go into what I have read since then. I talked about Kate by Tate James, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Love Scammed by Rosie Adams, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Ouran High School Host Club Volume 1 through 3, which I gave 1 out of 5 stars. Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. That was all that I talked about in that video. So let's get into the things that I've read since then. So I read Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning. This is about a woman who, her sister was killed on a study abroad program in Ireland, and she goes to Ireland to investigate because the detectives have basically told her, like, it's a closed case, we have no evidence. So she goes to investigate, and she discovers a other world basically, and she meets this guy who is kind of like her, able to see this other world, the Fae in this other world. And she is also a conduit for these magical artifacts that she needs and also that the guy needs. And so they go on this adventure or this heist or whatever to find out where this magical artifact is and to get it. So I gave this 2 out of 5 stars, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to give you 5 facts for why I rated it what I did to make up the 5 stars. So I will give you 2 things that I liked and 3 things that I didn't like. So I really liked the Fae that we see in this world, because I really feel like there's 2 different kinds of Fae in most Fae stories. Either they're all beautiful and just have wicked insides, or they're just completely gross. And in this, it was both. So you had the royalty that was pretty, and then the regular Fae that were gross. And I liked that. And I also liked the setup for some of, like, the plot lines. While I think the execution of the plot lines wasn't great, I definitely think that Karen Marie Moning sets the groundwork for a good, like, the thrills and the mystery. So I liked that. And then on to the 3 things that I didn't like. The writing was bad. It's written in the early 2000s. I want to say it was like 2006. Yes, 2006. You can definitely tell. The writing's very bland. It was hard for me to like any of the characters. The male main character, who was supposed to be love interest, was just your typical mysterious broody guy, and the female main character was your typical I'm not like other girls character, and nothing was really explained all that well. I definitely think that the direction that the plot lines went in was a little bit boring. There was a lot of emphasis on the relationship between them while having no structure for the relationship. You could tell that the author was trying to set up like this hate to love thing, and it just didn't work because I didn't care, for one, and I didn't really feel like any chemistry between them. I didn't like either of them. They're very one-dimensional. And in addition to that, there was just nothing memorable about it. Like, I'm trying to recall to you the things that I didn't like, and I can't remember because it just is so forgettable. The other reason I didn't like it is that there's no substance. Like, they're going from place to place trying to find this book, but everything is like behind closed doors, basically. Nothing exciting happens. You're not really discovering anything. Like, there's nothing happening. And it's a short book. It's only 309 pages, but it felt like it was 300 pages too long. So then I read Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This follows a young man, he's about 17 years old. Basically, he comes into custody of his son. The mother of the child kind of leaves the baby with him, and so he has to take care of that baby while simultaneously maintaining school, maintaining friendships. He's also part of the local gang that his father is part of, and that all of his cousins and everybody that he knows is part of. This is considered like the prequel to The Hate U Give, but they had very different flows, in my opinion. I felt like The Hate U Give had a very linear plot that you're following the whole way, and then you're getting kind of side plot lines. This definitely felt like it was just kind of living someone's life, and I loved it. Living in the shoes of someone that you have never, like someone's life you've never experienced before, is interesting. That was my point number one. I think seeing the character struggle between knowing that this being in this gang is not the way to go, and that's not what he wants for his son, while also struggling with the fact that the gang is all he's ever known. He's only ever been around people in this gang, and he knows the repercussions of wanting to get out. I think that that is a very real struggle that a lot of kids and adults deal with. Especially in areas where gangs are, running the streets, and that's all you see, and that's the only kind of success you see. And they are protection, and they just are everything that you know, and it's hard to break away from that. So while you even might logically know that that's not the right move and that you want better for yourself or for your kids or for your family or whatever, it's hard to separate that from everything, like from your whole life. And it's never just as easy as saying, oh, well, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna leave the gang. I also really liked the inclusion of his mother and his, the guy that he gets the job with. We see a little bit of the gentleman that owns the stores, the one that he works for. We see a little bit of Mav talk about his influence on his young life in The Hate U Give when he talks to Star. I really loved seeing that character. I think that character was so influential on Mav's life, and I love the insights that he provided. He was a very strong and sturdy man, a very stable man, and he kind of was the Star that Mav that Mav was able to look at and be like, there is a better way, that could be my life. And I also think that he helped Mav in a lot of ways with dealing with a lot of the toxic things that we put on boys and young men, and dealing with their emotions and things like that. And so I think he was the central Star that Mav needed to find a better way. And lastly, I think that Angie Thomas's writing is just so simplistic, but also so impactful. She's a little bit like Tiffany D. Jackson in the way that they're both very, very intentional with the words that they use, will give it to you straight. But Angie Thomas also puts these moments of joy and happiness and family and love into the story. So it feels more realistic, and it feels more honest, true, and believable. You connect more to the family, and it doesn't feel all doom and gloom all of the time. And it kind of gives you that sense of hope. Then I read Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This is the first book in Tessa Dare's Castles Ever After series, and this is I guess not enemies to lovers technically, but they kind of just get off on the wrong foot. So this follows our female main character who inherits this castle from her estranged godfather, and when she shows up to this castle, the Duke is still living there. And she quickly finds out that the Duke is scarred and that he hasn't been out in society, and in fact everybody thinks that he's dead. And then they also find out the reason behind why she inherits the castle when he's already living there and he didn't sell it. So she shouldn't have even be able to inherit it. You hear water splashing? It's my ferret digging in her water bowl. So then they go on this adventure, and of course they fall in love. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I love scarred heroes. I love it. I love when everybody in the hero's life is just because you're scarred doesn't mean that you're a monster, and that doesn't mean that the people around you don't want you there. I really love Tessa Dare's more modern way of writing historical romances. I think my biggest issue with historical romances at the moment, because I haven't read a whole lot of them, is that I always feel like there's a barrier between me and the characters, and it just doesn't feel like I can connect to them, and which makes it hard for me to root for a romance if I can't connect to the character. But I think with her very modern way of writing language, that it's easy to understand, and all of these terms like dukedom and all of that they throw around in historical romances are easier to understand the way that she writes. She also writes very endearing characters that have their own gripes and have their own issues, but she makes it so light and fun that it just feels like a joyful experience to read the book. That being said, my gripe about the book is that it doesn't feel new. So while her writing may make it seem fresh, at the end of the day, it's not new. We've seen characters like this before, and we've seen plots like this before. I might not have necessarily read them, or she might not have wrote a plot like this before, but it has been done. So it's not necessarily new and innovative, which you can really say about anything, because what is new and innovative? So then I read the first volume of a couple of manga, and I'm not necessarily going to rate them or give you like stars, because they're just first volumes. So I read the first volume of Hellsing, I read the first volume of Yotsuba, and I read the first volume of Absolute Boyfriend. Hellsing is a manga about the Hellsing. They're like a corporation almost, or a company, and they hunt vampires, and they use Dracula to do it. And then Yotsuba is about this young girl who moves to a new neighborhood, a new city, and she's just like meeting her neighbors. And then Absolute Boyfriend is about this girl who orders a mail order boyfriend online, and they get into some adventures together. So then I read All Scott and Bothered by Kerrigan Byrne, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. So this is about a chief justice and a woman that owns a gambling den, and I didn't like this. So I did like that this is a little bit darker than the historicals that I've read. It feels a little bit more real. Again, the characters are new and they feel like real people, and they have their own wants and desires. All right, so the things that I did not like, and there was a lot. I really didn't like Cassius at all. I think that he was judgmental and self-righteous. There was not enough groveling at the end for the way that he treated the heroine, in my opinion. There is a particular way that her first time scene is handled, and his response to finding out that she's a virgin, which is annoying. I hated it. I think it's gross. And even though this is a historical, I expect, or I want, certain beliefs from my characters. This was written in 2020, and the whole like virginity thing just was really off-putting to me. And then lastly, this was such a drag to read. It was so boring. The plot of the story is that there is girls going missing in this city, and the Chief Justice Cassius is attempting to find out who's doing it, and he thinks it might be the gambling den that she owns that's doing it. And then for one, he finds out far too late in the book that it's not her. And then they actually are like going through and finding out what had actually happened, which sounds like an interesting premise, but it just came together so entirely boringly. And I don't understand the Chief Justice thing. Isn't he like a judge? So he was acting like a cop the whole time, and I don't know, I just didn't like it. Cassius's character honestly ruined the whole story for me. If he had been a better character, I probably would have been okay with it, like with the plot and everything, but he just was so annoying, self-righteous, and the reason behind him being that way was just such bullshit, and I was not a fan. So then I read Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare, which is the second book in the Castles Ever After series. The story of a woman who is engaged to be married, and she goes to her soon-to-be brother-in-law and says, I want this marriage, like I want you to cancel the marriage. And the brother-in-law says, okay, give me a week to convince you to marry my brother, and you will, and if you're not convinced, then I'll, you know, sign the papers to have it canceled. Of course, they kind of have like a romance. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. I, again, really liked Tessa Dare's very modern writing. It made everything very easy to understand and it felt fun. I liked the actual relationship between the female and male main character. I think them as characters are good fits. And I liked the side characters. I think that Tessa Dare does a good job of making all of the side characters feel real and feel like you're kind of just looking in on, you know, a group of friends. I really didn't feel any chemistry between them. So while I felt like they were a good match, I didn't feel any tension. I didn't feel like that forbidden aspect of what you would expect from the brother's best or the brother's fiance trope. You expect a certain level of tension and forbiddenness, and I just didn't really feel any of that. And there was just this barrier between me and the story, which that point could be a me thing, but I really didn't feel like I could connect to the story on any deep and meaningful level. All right, so it is time for me to wrap up this section. So I will leave future me to explain what I read in the rest of the month. So let us talk about the rest of the books that I read in March. So after I read Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare, I read the first season of Lore Olympus by Rachel Smith. This is a web comic, basically a Hades and Persephone retelling. Olympus is like very modern, sleek, and then the real world or like Earth is very dated, I guess. And this follows Persephone and Hades and their like romance. I gave it 5 stars. The illustrations in this are absolutely some of the most stunning art I've ever seen in my whole life. I love how endearing and individual the characters are. I think they're all so distinct. I love the storyline in this. I think that the back and forth of will they, won't they, which we know they will, is interesting. There is definitely some like mystery involved where Persephone is not exactly who she says she is, and so you're trying to figure out like what's up with that. And then I also like the inclusion of some very real world issues into this. And even though there are trigger warnings, and I would recommend looking them up before you go into this, it kind of adds the layer of like feeling seen, I guess, in the story. It adds a layer of like, these are real people. And even though it's hard to read about and it can be triggering for some people, I think it just adds a depth to the story that makes it easier for you to connect to the characters. So next up, I listened to the audiobook for Homecoming Days by Kelly Papyrus. It's a short novella. It's only 112 pages. And it's about a woman in college who is entrenched in a love triangle, one with a activist and one with a like sports person, and she's doing a documentary centering around her historically Black college. So they're participating in her thing. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I couldn't do a 3v2 of things because really all I can say about this is that it's too short. There is not enough storyline for the amount of built-in past that is there. I definitely think because of the way you are just plopped down into these relationships that it's hard to root for any one relationship. It makes the conflicts very weird. And so I think that if we were to get another novella maybe before this one, it would have been a little bit better. It would have made more sense, but this just by itself was just very disjointed. So then I read Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell, which I gave 3 out of 5 stars. This follows a central family, the Fours family, and 2 people that are kind of entrenched in their lives, I guess. So you're following the mom of the family, you're following Owen, who is a neighbor, and you are following Safri, who was a client of the father of the family. And there is a string of assaults going on in their neighborhood. And so you're kind of getting these three perspectives, like deterioration as time is going on. A lot of people think it's Owen. He gets entrenched in the incel community. Safri is basically is becoming obsessed and stalking the father woman that you're following from the family. She is kind of losing it a little bit. She's kind of become obsessed with the idea that her husband is cheating on her. So there's just a lot to the story in addition to the assaults. Again, I can't really do a 3v5. I thought it was okay. There isn't really like anything distinguishing about the story. And I'm gonna say the same thing about The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell, which I gave 3 stars. The Family Upstairs is like a cult story about this woman who inherits a house that was like the place of a cult, essentially. And both of them were just okay. The Invisible Girl, I felt, had a fantastic build-up, and then the ending was horrible. Whereas with The Family Upstairs, the build-up was really non-existent, kind of boring, and then it got good, and then it just wasn't good anymore. I think the problem is that, or at least for me, is that it seems like Lisa Jewell tries to add like a fiction-y, like women's fiction, chick lit feeling to the endings, and it just does not work with like the themes that she's going for in the books. So then I read 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This follows a guy who writes a blog about the 8 perfect murders in literature, and the FBI approaches him and basically says like, someone is copying the murders from your blog and we want to know what's up. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This seems to be a book that you either really like or you really don't like, and I'm in the really don't like. To begin with, I liked the setup of the books, like including the books and the stories in there, because it makes it so that you know that it's connected to your main character, but you don't know how, because who could have seen this blog, right? So then I also really liked the unreliable narrator aspect of the story. I think that it was set up well that he also kind of has secrets, so you don't know how you should be viewing the story, who you should be like looking at as a suspect. You don't really know if he's stable, is it him, like what's going on. I did not like really the plot. I didn't like the plot progression. I liked the concept, but I felt like the plot was poorly executed and it was very slow. I did not like character himself, because you have like all of these hidden depths to him, but the way that it was executed and the way that he was written, he feels very flat. And I also didn't really like the ending. So one thing I will say about this book is it does spoil other books. Pretty much any crime book that is mentioned in here, you're gonna get spoiled for. So just keep that in mind before you go into it. There's probably a list out there of all the books that are mentioned in the story so that you can kind of like avoid those. But I got spoiled for a bunch of books, probably not any books that I would have read myself, but the story definitely tells you what's gonna happen at the end. Like you're already set up for what's gonna happen at the end, and it just kind of loses a little bit of like the suspense and the interest. So it just wasn't great. With His Song by B. Love, this is a short novella story. It kind of plops you right in the middle of a bunch of things that are going on. So it's about a single mom who is having some issues with her ex-husband, who is trying to take custody of her child. So she panics and takes her child to her current, like the guy that she's talking to, but they don't really have a relationship. So I guess you could call them friends. And that's pretty much the story. It's a short novella, like I said. It's like 100 pages or something like that. And I gave this 3 stars. Kind of with what I was saying earlier, I don't really have like a substantial lot to say about the book, so I can't really give you like a 3v5. It was okay. I mean, I like B. Love's writing. I just don't really think that novellas work well with the kind of story that she's writing, because you're plopped right in the middle of these relationships and they're pre-established, and it's not always the most believable. And so you're kind of like, well, if I don't root for the couple, if I don't care if they're together, then why am I reading this? And in comparison to that, I read The Roommate by Brandy Bush, who is the pen name for another romance author. I'll put her name right here. I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. So this is, again, a short novella. It's only 167 pages, and it's about this woman in college who ends up spending the Christmas break with her roommate's family. And she discovers that she can hear her roommate's parents having sex through the wall of the guest room that she's staying in. And she kind of has a crush on both of the parents. I love this. I think that the short timeline worked really well for the novella. The fact that we had not have like a pre-established relationship that we were just kind of assuming you were already comfortable with was great. It was just based off sex and it was just based on a crush. This is not a romance novella. This is erotica. This does not end in an HEA, a happily ever after, which is kind of like a prerequisite for being considered a romance. So it's not an HEA, but it's great. It's steamy, it's sexy. I loved it. And it was 5 stars. I don't have anything bad to say about it. So that's my 5 for 5. And then the last book that I finished for the month, I actually finished yesterday, and it is The Queen Takes Night by Jolie Sue Burkhart, which is another novella. It's 190 pages, and this is about a woman who has always been on the run her whole life. She was an orphan, and she's always kind of had to take care of herself. And then one day she is working at her job and she gets attacked by these beings that she doesn't really know what they are, but they've been hunting her entire life. And she gets saved by these 2 guys that are kind of like warrior bodyguards. You're our vampire queen and we will protect you. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. This is short, so again, I'm not gonna do a 3v2, but I thought it was okay. The writing is very kind of lackluster, and this definitely was really quick as far as development of the story. I'm talking like page 2, they're banging and drinking blood. So I don't have a problem with that, but it sort of had the element of like fated mates, but I don't want to build a relationship, so I'm just gonna say they're fated mates sort of situation, which can work in novellas, but I just didn't really think it did work for this one. Also, I honestly just didn't care about her world. I didn't care about her being a queen. And there was a scene where she like comes into her powers, literally comes into her powers, and it's just kind of like lackluster. I just didn't really care, and that's kind of how I felt about it. I just didn't really care. I might continue. When I do continue, I'll probably reread this one, but Library of Tomes loves this series. She highly recommends it. She's like the one that I actually read this because of. So I might continue. I trust her judgment. So I might continue on and see how I'm feeling about them, but I'll definitely reread this one when I do that, and it's not going to be for a while. So that is all of the books that I read last month. I didn't have a fantastic reading month. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I didn't even have the attention span to sit here and film this video, and it's not even that long, but I couldn't do it. And that's kind of how my reading has been lately. And I would like to get out of that because I have all of these big fantasies that I really want to read, but I just can't find the motivation to do it. But leave your comment down below on any of the books that I read in this month, or what you read in this month. How is your reading going? I would love to know. Please, please, please say you're just in the same boat as I am. I would love to not be alone, but that is gonna be it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next video.